Good morning again, everybody. So today we're talking about freedom, finding freedom. When we think about freedom, we understand freedom in terms of things that we choose within this world. We think of the freedom to choose our religion, to choose where we want to worship, how we want to worship, who we want to worship. We have the freedom of religion. We have the freedom of speech. We can stand up for the things that we value. We can stand up and speak about them and put them out there. We can put out our words, our thoughts, our opinions about what we believe. We have the freedom in political realms to look at all the political parties that are present and to look at their mandates and choose, well, what political party I would like to support based on what they want to do. We have freedom to choose in many, many ways. And that freedom is enshrined in the laws of the country, in the civil laws, in the Constitution. Those laws protect our freedom to choose how we are going to live our life. And from that freedom, we also have the freedom to protect what we believe. And so we protect what we value. And some of that protecting turns out and looks like war. We see war throughout the world where people are fighting to protect their freedom, protect what they value, protect their choice in how they would like to live life. We see the protecting of this freedom in the form of protests. Again, around the world, in every country, we see protests, people standing up, coming together to say what they think about laws, about injustice, about social issues, people standing up to express themselves. And on a smaller scale, we protect our freedom when we engage in conversation or disagreement with friends, with family, with loved ones. We have different ideas, different ways of seeing things, and we sometimes get into arguments about what we see and believe to be the right way. So that is the freedom that we all have, the freedom that is enshrined in the laws of our country. But that freedom also then puts us at odds with other people. In war, there are two sides, both fighting for their own freedoms. When we have an argument with someone about whose freedom is more important, right, we're putting ourselves at odds when we're fighting for these freedoms. Is this the freedom that the Lord came to give? A freedom that puts us at odds with each other. Is that the Lord's freedom? We read in our recitation this morning, it is a universal tenet of our faith that no mortal could have been saved unless the Lord came into the world. No one could be free from bondage, free from slavery, free from sin, unless the Lord came into the world. He came to give us freedom. So what is that freedom? Is it the same freedom that we're fighting for when it comes to war, when it comes to politics, when it comes to things of this world? Is that what the Lord gave us the freedom to do, to fight with each other? Because when we're at odds with each other, it only serves to cause anger, to cause frustration. And anger and frustration drives people apart, puts a wedge in families, put a wedge in relationships. Is this the freedom the Lord came to give us? These freedoms that I've just described are earthly freedoms. They are freedoms that are constrained by time and space. They are freedoms that we may be striving for, may be fighting for, but once we die, they are of no meaning to us, no consequence to us anymore. And so these freedoms are earthly freedoms. They affect us in the here and now, but they're not freedoms that we take with us when we die. And so Easter is a good time to reflect on that freedom that the Lord came on earth to give us, a freedom that is so important that if we don't have this freedom, we're going to die. And so what is that freedom? What is that freedom that is not constrained? A freedom that is not about politics. A freedom that is not about social issues. A freedom that's not about the life situations that I'm in. What is this freedom that the Lord wants to give us and died in order to give us? A freedom that instead of dividing us, a freedom that unites us. This is the freedom that the Lord came to give us. But after 2,000 years, this freedom is so radical, is so new, that after 2,000 years we still are struggling to find this freedom. After 2,000 years since the Lord's coming into the world, we still struggle to find this freedom that we so long for. So why is it so elusive? Why is this freedom that we strive for, why is it so elusive? I want to read to you from the book of John. You can follow along in your pew cards. We're reading from John 8. Then Jesus said to those Jews who believed in him, "If you abide in my word, you are my disciples indeed, and you shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free." And they answered him, "We are Abraham's descendants and have never been in bondage to anyone. How can you say you will be made free?" This is where we're at. Where are these? We are the scribes and the Pharisees responding, "What bondage? I'm not in bondage to anyone. I feel free. I can make my own choices." No, the scribes and the Pharisees are in us. We respond by saying, I'm not in bondage. Really? This is the tricky part. This is the tricky part. We are not able to see that we are in bondage. But as of ourselves, we see life as our own. We see our choices as our own. We see that I can make my own choices, that I know where I'm going, I know what's going to make me happy, and I'm going to choose to follow what I believe will make me happy. That's the freedom, the earthly freedom that we have to make our choices. And what we don't see is that it is, in fact, a bondage. I want to read to you from the book Secrets of Heaven, 892, again in your pew card. As long as we are enslaved, we have no perception of the actual state of affairs. When we are caught up in our own wants and desires, when we are caught up in our own life, when we are caught up in what we see as what we need to get, we are enslaved. When we are caught up in what is mine, we are enslaved to me. I'm a slave to the I. I need, I want, I know. I'm a slave to I. And then we can't perceive the reality of our life. We can't see that we're enslaved to this I. In a state of slavery, when craving and falsity take control. So what are the cravings and falsities? Cravings are anything that come from a selfish love. So I'm right, you are wrong. That's a craving that we have. Anger, that's a craving. Frustration, that's a craving. Anything that comes from self is a craving, and falsity can be any idea that is used to support that. Even What is a true idea? A true idea that this life is mine to do with what I want. That's what the Lord gives us. Is it true? Yes. But when it's used to support something selfish, it is now false. So when cravings and falsities take control, those of us under the yoke think we are enjoying freedom. And that's the problem. We think we are in freedom because we enjoy it. But this is grossly untrue. At such a time, we are carried away by the pleasures that our vices and the indulgences of them bring us. Or in other words, by the pleasures that selfish kinds of love bring us. This is its pleasure. Since it is pleasure that engrosses us, we see it as freedom. And this is what makes the freedom that the Lord offers so hard to find. Is that the freedom that we are in, the freedom of self, is so pleasurable. It feels good to us. It feels good to us when we are sure in what we're doing. It feels good to us when we think we are right. It feels good. Otherwise, we wouldn't do it. Our selfishness is pleasurable to us, and that's why it's tricky to find a way out of where we're at, find our way out of earthly freedoms that center around me towards the Lord's freedom, heavenly freedom, true freedom that revolves around others and Him. We read further from the book New Jerusalem 142. Doing evil freely seems to be a kind of freedom, but it is actually slavery, since this freedom comes from our love for ourselves and our love for this world, and these loves come from hell. So one of the things that we come to recognize as we journey with the Lord is come to recognize that the loves that we have, the pleasures that we feel aren't all good. And probably most of the time they're pretty selfish in their origin. We read further from Divine Providence, which gives us a couple of reasons and a couple of points that we can follow. One reason people do not make a similar effort to move from spiritual slavery to spiritual freedom is that they do not know what spiritual slavery and spiritual freedom are. So that's the first thing we need to do, is be clear in our minds about what the different freedoms are. There is earthly freedom, the freedom to choose how we're going to live life in this world. But there is also a spiritual freedom. A spiritual freedom that is totally opposite to earthly freedom. And the results are totally opposite. Earthly freedoms kind of divide us, whereas spiritual freedoms are going to unite us. So let's read further. They do not have the truths that would teach them, and in the absence of truth, they think that spiritual slavery is freedom, and spiritual freedom is slavery. So this is part of our journey, is to come to see that the state that I'm in is actually slavery. When I am caught up in myself, I am in slavery. And that's hard. It's a hard place to be, to recognize that, darn it, I'm a slave to this. I'm a slave to my anger. I'm a slave to my sense of always being right. I'm a slave to this. It's a hard place to be. We continue reading. A third reason is that not many people look into themselves and see their sins. And if they do not see them and refrain from them, they are in the freedom of their sins, or hellish freedom, that is essentially slavery. So we have to, if we want to move out of the earthly freedom, which is really a slavery, into the spiritual freedom, we've got to pass through a process. The process of looking into ourselves, examining ourselves, seeing where there is evil, where there is selfishness in me, and turning away from that. And only then Are we opening ourselves up to spiritual freedom? That is the process that the Lord gives us. We call it by different names. We might say it's a rebirth or a regeneration. Whatever words we want to use, it's that process of moving out of ourselves towards the Lord, away from the things that are hurtful towards the things that join us together. So what is the spiritual freedom? If we start drilling down into the spiritual freedom, what is the spiritual freedom that you have been given? What is the spiritual freedom that the Lord has put into place through His death on the cross? The Lord has given each one of us the opportunity to engage in this personal relationship with Him, to engage in this process of self-examination and repentance. That's the freedom that the Lord gives. That is what spiritual freedom is, the freedom to engage in your personal spiritual growth. That is spiritual freedom. Through that process, we leave behind the slavery of ourself and we take on the things that are from the Lord. And as we receive the things that are from the Lord, things of love and care and thoughtfulness, there is freedom. Freedom from Him and freedom from the battles that we have with each other. Freedom from the fight in this world. So true freedom is not an earthly freedom. True freedom leaves behind the things of this world and moves towards the things that are loving and caring. And when we are in that true heavenly freedom, does it mean that we've got to leave behind earthly things? Does it mean we don't care what happens? Sure, we have an opinion about everything. We still have an opinion. If not, we probably have a firmer, stronger opinion about the choices I am making for my life. Spiritual freedom gives us that strength in knowing this is the choice for my life. But what it also gives us is the freedom to say, and you must live your life. That you have the freedom of the Lord to make your own choices. I will make the choices for my life. I must make the choices for my life. I must have an opinion about things. I must be able to look at things and make a choice. But I can also look and see at the other side. I can see where you are at. I can see that you have had a different experience and that you must walk your walk with the Lord. That is spiritual freedom. I don't have to force my opinion onto you. I can share it. Yes, share your opinion. But share your opinion with love and then leave it. That's what sharing in our opinion in love, it's not about forcing. It's just, here is this idea. This is what I base my life on. This is how I live my life. And leave it up to others and their conscience and the Lord to work with them. So spiritual freedom releases us from the upset and the fears and the frustrations of this world. Yes, we've got to participate in this world, but the way that our life then flows into those earthly freedoms is very different. It's non-combative. It's more about understanding. It's more about compassion. It's more about hearing each other out. When we come from spiritual freedom into natural freedom, the world changes. So as a church, and as a new church, this is what we are about supporting each other in that quest for spiritual freedom, supporting each other in that quest for personal spiritual growth, for your personal engagement with the Lord in His Word, to learn from Him and to be guided by Him according to your conscience. That's what we're about. That's what's new about the new church, is that we have this process-driven approach, that we know that we are in slavery, and we have a process of rebirth that the Lord gives us to help us move into a new state. That's what's new about the new church. That's what we celebrate at Easter, that Lord has given us a way out of our slavery and into freedom. In your pew card, I've given a task. A task, again, is part of our process of looking into ourselves, examining ourselves, working with the Lord to move us onto a new state. So here's a spiritual principle you can use, or you can find your own one. The spiritual principle is that spiritual freedom is the freedom to choose to engage in your spiritual work. That's the freedom that the Lord has given each one of us, the freedom to engage. So here's a task. This week, I will put in effort to read the Word and reflect on my life. I will take note of any resistance or forgetting to do the task. And how do I engage with that task, right? Am I remembering to read the Word? Am I remembering my task? These things we take note of. So take note of my experience, of what's happening within myself, to do as I try and do my reading and my reflecting. So that's our task. Can I read the Lord's Word? Can I examine myself? What are the barriers to me doing that? Is it a time thing? Is it a focus thing? What are the barriers in me that stop me engaging with the Lord? Amen.